Welcome back. So today in class, we talked about layer adjustments, which are non-destructive layers that adjust everything underneath it. And most of these adjustments or changes have to do with the tone of an image as well as the colors. So we can make really beautiful effects using it. And because it comes with its own mask, we can apply those effects to specific parts of a layer. Let's put this into practice in today's activity. When you open today's activity, you're going to see on the right where your layers panel is, there are 4 levels. Okay, we're going to start with level 1, which is our flower. I'm going to open this group and you're going to see that there's only one thing in this group. With your flower layer selected, you're going to add an adjustment layer. Your adjustment layers look like a half-filled circle and they're located on the bottom of your layers panel. You see there's quite a few options. We're going to focus just on one today, the one that's called hue and saturation. These are all adjustment layers. They all do slightly different things and can be used in a range of ways. Hue and saturation has to do with the color, which is the hue, and the intensity of the color, which is the saturation. So we're going to select that. And when you select that, you will have something called a properties panel pop up. Properties panel allows you to edit your adjustment layer. Now, in this case, we have hue, which is the color, saturation, which is the intensity, and lightness, which is how light or dark it is. We want to desaturate this, meaning we want to strip out all the color from it. I'm going to move my saturation slider all the way to the left. Now, you'll see that my image now looks like it's black and white. Now, when you work with adjustment layers, you'll always have this properties panel here. But when you're done with it, you might want to hide it. The way you hide it is you just hit the PRO for properties and it'll hide it. Now I have this beautiful black and white image. And if you see my adjustment layers, not only did it give me a hue, I could see the word hue here, it gave me a link and a mask automatically. Every adjustment layer comes with its own mask. Now what we want to do is kind of figure out which flower we still want to have in color. So I'm going to zoom in, pick the flower I want. I think I want this one here. Now, whatever selection tool you use is your comfort level. But if you're using a tool that needs to read the layer, you have to make sure you are back on the flower layer. So for example, if I wanted the object selection tool, if I'm on my hue and saturation, it doesn't know what I want to select. I'm going to have to click on the flower first, okay? So let's try the object selection tool. This may or may not work very well. I personally prefer the pen tool. So I'm going to make a general selection. I think it did a pretty good job. If I zoom in, I can see that some of my edges around here need some cleaning up. Basically, you want a very nice selection of your flower because it is going to affect how this design looks. Now, once I'm happy with my selection, I need to activate my mask that's attached to my adjustment layer. My mask is right here. The reason for that is we're going to kind of hide or conceal some of the pixels on this hue and saturation adjustment layer. And what that will allow us to do is see behind it. It's almost like poking a hole on one layer to see underneath. But this layer is a layer that's showing black and white. Now I have my layer mask selected. I can take a paint bucket tool, paint with black, which will conceal this effect, and click in my selection. When I do that, suddenly it looks like my flower is being colored. I'm going to deselect. What's really happening is my hue and saturation adjustment layer has been hidden on that one flower. And it creates this very beautiful effect where something looks black and white and something looks like in color. When you are done with this, you're going to take a screenshot and put it in your shared progress check-ins. It lets us know you know how to use this. Then you're going to have to hide the layer that says level 1. Move on to the portrait. In the portrait, we have this beautiful young woman and we have a Polaroid. And we're going to do an effect where everything's in black and white except for where the Polaroid is. To do this, we're going to need another adjustment layer. So I'm going to click on my portrait. I'm going to add an adjustment layer. Again, hue and saturation. And I'm going to desaturate. I want everything black and white. You're going to see that that affects everything. So that red background is no longer red. That's fine. We don't really need it. It was just so you could see the Polaroid. I'm going to hide my properties and I'm going to bring my Polaroid over. So I'm going to take the Polaroid layer, take my move tool, and decide which part of this young woman do I want to look like it's in color still. So I like her beautiful eyes. So I'm going to put this over her eyes. I'm going to zoom in a little. Now, what I want to do is make a selection inside this Polaroid. I can use my magic wand tool. I can use to select in here, right? Or I can use a rectangular marquee and make a rectangle, whichever one I like. Now again, I have to be sure I'm using the mask to poke a hole so I can see through this. So I'm going to activate my mask, fill this with black because black will conceal this effect. And suddenly it looks like I've colored in her like that part, but all I've done is kind of poke a hole in this mask to conceal this effect. And if I want to move my Polaroid image, I can select both the Polaroid and the hue and saturation by holding shift, kind of control where this color goes. So I'm not limited. I do have to click on the Polaroid and the effect as well. That's how you do part 2. After you're done with part 2, you're going to take another screenshot and upload it to your shared slide. Then you're going to hide this and move on to part 3. So we have this really pretty texture and we have this building. I want that texture to be used in this photograph to create like this grungy painted effect. So I'm going to resize this first, drag my paint over my picture, resize it while holding shift so I don't lose this pretty proportion. It's okay if it overlaps a bit. And I'm going to use a layer blend mode because we used that the other day. We know how beneficial it is. I'm going to change this from normal to overlay. Problem is that doesn't look that great because of the color in this image. I still like the paint splatter, but that vibrant red is really staying there, and I can't really see the pretty colors of my building. So I want this effect, but I don't want the color of the effect. So this is where a hue and saturation adjustment is going to help us. I'm going to make sure I have my paint texture activated. I still have it as overlay. I'm going to add another hue and saturation adjustment layer. And again, I'm going to desaturate this so this looks black and white. The problem is, now this hue and saturation adjustment layer is making everything underneath it black and white, even my buildings. So what I really want is this hue and saturation adjustment layer to be clipped to this paint texture, or just to affect this. And there's a very quick way of making sure that this effect only works with one layer at a time. It's called a clipping mask. But we can do this really quickly by holding down Option or Alt on our keyboard and simply clicking on our hue layer. When you do that, you're going to see a little arrow pop up. I'm going to do it one more time. Hold down Alt or Option, click here, a little drop down arrow will happen. And what that means is this hue and saturation adjustment layer is only affecting this texture, but not the building. So I get the beauty of that paint splatter, but not the color that was really being a little too intense. If I find that this is still too intense, I can lower the opacity of my paint texture just a slight, so I still get that painted effect, but it's not as intense. Okay, when you're done with this, you're gonna save this again as a JPEG to show us that you've done level 3. The last one is your choice. When you open this, you're gonna see nothing is there. What we're asking you to do is research your own photograph. I recommend you use unsplash.com. They have good quality pictures. Then we want you to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer and desaturate the entire image like we did for the first. Then we're gonna use that mask and poke a hole in the image so that one part of the image is still in color. If you forgot how to do that, you're gonna do the same technique you did for the flower, but for your own photograph. When you're done, you're gonna export each one of these levels as a JPEG. So you have 4 attachments to today's Google Classroom. Be patient, use adjustment layers, and good luck.